welcome you all on this groundbreaking session, kindly organized by our knowledge partners, Grant Thornton, which most of you would know is a leading advisory firm globally. Just to set some context, I'm sure you all agree that we're living in difficult times and our businesses have taken a hit at varying levels. And in some cases, it has come to a grinding halt as well. At the same time, there have been a call, particularly from the micro, small, and medium-sized businesses for survival before stability. We felt that it was opportune for us to gather some views from experts in the area of MSME, compliance, indirect tax, and public policy, and find a way to stream some of these thoughts and these learnings into some meaningful actions for all of us in these difficult times. We will also follow through with some sessions after today, depending on the kind of questions and the requests which we get. And we thank Grant Thornton for their continuing support. Let me begin with some introductions. Firstly, Mr. Chuk, who is the Director of Startups from Grant Thornton. I thank him immensely for putting this together, as always. We also have on our panel 4 leading experts from Grant Thornton. Mr. Vivek Anand, who is the Executive Director of Compliance and Outsourcing, and Leena Madok, who is the Director in Compliance of Outsourcing. Both Vivek and Leena will walk us through part A of the session, covering MSME registration and landscaping plethora of schemes which are currently available. We also have Krishan Arora, a Partner Indirect Tax, and Karan Kakkar, Associate Partner Indirect Tax. Both Krishan and Karan will walk us through part B and part C of the session, covering merchandise and service export schemes and issues around GST, particularly refunds. I also thank equally to many participants who have joined us today from different walks of life. Our Thai Global Chair, as always, we thank him for his support, Mr. Mahavir Sharma. We also have our very senior charter members from Rajasthan present today. We have a number of associate members, particularly who are running startups, representing us today. We have advisors, CFOs from the membership pool today present as well, and many friends and associates whom we all know have also agreed to participate today. So it is a wide group, Grant Thornton. We have had an overwhelming response. We were anticipating about 30 participants. We've already crossed 50. So welcome all, and thank you very much. Before I start some key points, we had sent out a questionnaire to all participants detailing some of these issues and challenges. Quite a few have filled them out, and that has really helped us in steering the session today. My request to those of you who have not filled out the questionnaire is to still do it and send it across so that it will help us steer some follow-on sessions. Okay, so if I start, firstly, Vivek and Leena, if you can cover some themes as follows in your presentation and your discussion, I'll be highly obliged. If you can cover things like what's the status of the MSME market and their challenges, what's the eligibility criteria for registrations under these various schemes? That's a question a lot of people have asked us. What are some of the recent announcements made by the government? If you can summarize that so that we're all on the same page. And how can you as GT help some of us here in Rajasthan and across India really, for some of the members who have joined. So over to you, Vivek and Leena, to begin part A of the session. And thank you.
Thanks, Chirag. Thank you everyone for joining this webinar. My name is Vivek Anand. I am Executive Director for Compliance and Outsourcing in Grant Thornton, and I'll quickly take you through a couple of slides that addresses what Chirag has asked. Okay, so let me take you through quickly as far as MSME landscape is concerned in India, in Indian economy. So if you look at some of the quick numbers, I mean, registrations for MSME has increased by about 20% from 19 to 20. MSME contributes about 6.11 percentage in manufacturing GDP, and of course 24.63 in services GDP. So the contribution over the years, if you look at, is growing actually. More number of people are actually working for MSME, 120 million as we speak, employed by MSME. They contribute about 45% of overall export. And of course, I mean, the government is also doing some of the things like they're coming out with a e-com platform like Bharat Craft, which is like Alibaba, and they're launching over 63.4 million MSME in the country as we speak. And you'll be surprised to know more than half of them are from rural areas, basically. So that's the quick landscape about MSME in Indian economy. At GT, we work with multiple MSME trying to leverage some of the services and knowledge that we have within the firm and provide services, tailor-made services to MSME. And what we have seen is that there are certain things as far as challenges faced by MSME are concerned. And if you look at this particular slide, talks about registration process. So while they understand the registration process, but what are the nitty-gritties? How do you manipulate? How do you follow through the registration process is something which they always take our help. Of course, there is a compliance around payment for MSME. However, it is again delayed. So delay in payment is one of the challenges. In rejection of loan application, so they go through the loan application process. However, because of some points here and there, they get rejected. So they actually seek our help in navigating through those process. Of course, tax and regulatory areas, one important area within the Indian business, and how do you navigate through and be compliant while you're doing your business. That's one area of concern or challenge for MSME. Again, some of them are stressed MSME, so funding requirement, knowledge of different MSME schemes that are there in government. Then, of course, support in the growth advisory. So now, most of the inquiries that we get is around, okay, now I am doing this. How do I use multiple MSME scheme to actually fund myself for my growth? And that's where we come in. We say, okay, we'll help you through the scheme, plus we'll help you grow your business. What is the next level of business? So those are some of the challenges that we've seen MSME facing, and we helping them in some of those challenges. Now here, I will transfer to Leena to talk about the eligibility requirement of MSME.
Thanks, Vivek, and thanks to TiE Rajasthan and Chirag for providing us this opportunity. I'll talk about the registration eligibility and the criteria which is existing right now and which was there earlier. So if we can see, the earlier criteria was based on the bifurcation between manufacturing industry and the service industry, whereas now we have a merged criteria. Like the same rules apply to both the industry, whereas earlier it was applying differently for manufacturing and services. And as we are all aware that these MSME Act is not applicable for a trading company. So the previous criteria was based only on the investment in the plant and machinery. And the government of India was trying since 2018 to bring the Amendment Act so as to change the criteria from investment to a joint criteria for investment and turnover, which they were unable to do so. But now, as they brought out this economic package under the Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, which the government has launched, they have brought about this change also. So the main idea or the main criteria of the government from bringing this change was earlier enterprises were having a big turnover, whereas they were not going for investment in the plant and machinery and not upgrading their tools and the quality of the product, whereas now they will be able to do so as the investment limit has been increased. So that was one of the thing, and now it's a joint criteria, as we can see the different limits which have been prescribed for the micro, small and the medium industry. And moreover, now that the turnover is one of the criteria and the government has the requirement of submitting your GSTR return documents on the website, so it will be able to easily tally it with whatever you have filled while saying that this is your criteria. So can we move on to the next slide?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Udyam registration, this is the new registration which is required. So earlier the name of the registration was the Udyog Aadhaar. So registration under the MSME Act, it's an optional registration. But we should remember that if we want to have the benefit of any of the scheme which is being provided by the government, then we have to get ourselves registered. So this is an online registration, just like Udyog Aadhaar. This is also online, but this is a bit complicated as compared to the previous one, as you are required to provide your PAN detail and the GST number, and every year you are required to update the information. So we'll go step by step about it. So first of all, when you log into the government website, the details are given on your screen. You have to provide the Aadhaar number. So Aadhaar number, in case of a proprietor firm, obviously it will be of a proprietor, but in case of a partnership firm, it has to be of the managing partner. And in case of HUF, the Karta is the one. And other entities like LLP or a trust or a public or private limited company, it has to be the authorized signatory whose Aadhaar number will be provided. And in case of such entities which are registered, like the trust or the private limited company, it has to provide its PAN and the GST number also. So the requirement for Udyam registration is compulsory with effect from 1st of July 2020. So in case you are registered already, still you have to go for re-registration from 1st of July. This form is to be filled online, and then after verification of the detail, you will be issued the registration certificate. So can we move on to the next slide? So once you are registered, what is to be done is that the registered enterprise, it is required to update the information with respect to its ITR return and the GST return every year. And based on that, you will receive an email about if there is any change in your status. Like suppose you overshoot the criteria in any one of the category, like the investment or turnover, then you will be moved on to the next category. Whereas you will be moved on to the lower category only when you do not meet the criteria for both the requirement, that is the investment and the turnover. So can we move on?
So we'll go to the recent announcement now.
Yeah. So we'll go to the recent announcement, but before that, I'll also like to talk about like why should an entity go for registration first of all under the MSME Act. So for me, the topmost criteria would be the assurance which is provided under the Act for receiving the payment within the 45 days time period. So if the supplier is not getting the payment within a period of 45 days, then he is entitled for a monthly compounded rate of interest as may be prescribed by the government. And also, I'll say the public procurement policy which is there from the government, under which the 25% registration is provided to the MSME sector. So that's one of the benefits which everyone can avail of, especially I'll say in today's scenario, that you register yourself under the PPP and take the advantage of it. And I'll also say the bill discounting or the trade receivable discounting platform which the government has created that helps an entity to have some kind of liquidity. Also, there are various benefits like the ISO certification, the whole of the your fees is given back to you for whatever you spent on that, and as the government wants you to have quality products. And then the support it provides in terms of entrepreneur skills or the skill development of your managerial staff. So those are some of the benefits which are already existing and beneficial for your unit. If we talk about what are the recent announcement, the first one is the GECL, like the guaranteed credit line scheme, which has come out. So we shouldn't confuse this scheme with what the banks are providing. All the public sectors have, all the public sector banks have also come out with their own schemes. They are also providing something like 10% of your outstanding amount. This is one of the schemes which the banks are providing on their own. This is a scheme on top of that. This is something which the government of India, the central government is providing. So over here, one thing is they are providing is the credit limit, which is like 25, if you have an outstanding of 25 crores as on 29th of February, then they are providing 20% of it or 5 crore, whatever is less. And also your turnover should not be more than 100 crores of rupees. And the tenor of this loan is for a period of 4 years and moratorium of 12 months on the principal payment. And this scheme is available till 31st of October. So over here, the first thing which they are providing is the credit line, and the other thing which is they are providing the central government is the 100% guarantee. So there are two things being covered over here. So this is only in respect of your existing, if you are an existing borrower, and this is only for units which have the liquidity. If you are an NPA, then you are not eligible for the scheme. So we'll go to the next scheme, Vivek.
Yeah.
So the next scheme is, this is the one which is available for the NPAs who are eligible for restructuring as per the RBI guideline. So over here, what is being provided is that you're being given equity support by the government. So whatever you get from the government, it will be only the 15% of the equity you already have invested in your entity. So of that, only 15% will be provided, or rupees 75 lakh, whichever is less. So this scheme is again available till 31st of March 2021. So this is for the NPAs. And this is a kind of equity support which is being provided. We can move to the next slide. And this is the scheme which government has brought in. It's called Fund of Funds. And over here, government is focusing on the growth-oriented enterprises, or the enterprises which have the ability to go further. At present, we have the venture capital which invest in startups, but we don't have anyone who's focusing on the enterprises which have a potential for growth and which have the viability. So this is the scheme government has brought in, this fund. Basically, this is not a scheme, it's a fund. So this fund, through this fund, government has set up this fund with 10,000 crores of rupees, and it wants to leverage it through the daughter funds for raising further capital of up to 50,000 rupees. So this fund, along with the various PEs, it will be investing in the enterprises which have the growth potential. So once they grow up to a level, they can go for listing. We'll talk about listing later on. So we can right now go to the next slide, Vivek. So other benefits, if we talk about, first is the government has disallowed the procurement tenders up to INR 2,000 crores. So up to 2,000 crores, only the Indian companies will be allowed to fill in the tenders. The outsiders cannot. So this is basically the intention over here, is to support all the units which were captive units, you can say, which were supplying to their mother units. So now they are not doing so. So in order to support them, government has come out with this scheme. Other support is in term of, sorry, I'll just have some water. So the government has launched a champion portal, which is basically to help the MSMEs. So over here, they can put in their grievances and the support can be provided. Also, as I said, that public procurement policy, which the government has. So over there, the government has asked the public sector enterprises to make the payment within a period of 45 days, and the fintech is being used. I'll say that the government has taken loan from the World Bank. World Bank has provided a support of 5,600 crores for the fintech market, and also the e-market linkage, which government is trying to prepare a platform where all the MSMEs can come and market their products. So this is kind of some support which the government is providing for the e-linkage. We can move to the next slide, Vivek.
Yeah. Over here, I like to talk about, like I talked earlier about this platform where you can have your trade receivable discounted. This is called a TRED system. It is for financing and discountings of trade receivable. So I'll just try to explain in brief what this whole procedure is. So basically, this is a e-platform. Over here, there is the buyer, there is the seller, and there is a financing company, the financing agent. So once the supplier supplies the material, he uploads the his invoice over this system, and it is then sent to the buyer, and the buyer accepts it. Once the buyer accepts it, then the auction starts. So once auction starts, then the seller has the opportunity to choose the person who is providing the best rates, and once that is accepted, then the financer account is debited and the seller's account gets credited. So it's a very easy way of having the liquidity. So this is a very good platform which everyone can use. And in respect of already existing schemes, as I said, like there is this credit guarantee scheme where challenges usually which are faced by MSME are they are not able to prepare a good application or a project report, and then they are required to have some good CIBIL rating by the directors, and the knowledge is not there where to approach, whom to approach. So these are some of the challenges which most of the MSME face, and they can improve upon it so that they can have the loans approved. So I'll talk about this listing platform which is there on the BSE and the NSE for the SMEs. Already as on date, there are around 180 equities which are listed by the SMEs on these platforms. So some of the benefits, as we can see on the screen, are the easy access to capital, the enhanced visibility and prestige, encourages the growth, of course, and it provides the liquidity for the shareholders. And also it can be used as a very good ESOP scheme, like the employee incentives. You can provide the shares of your company, and once they are listed, any of your employee can go ahead and cash it and then have the liquidity. Even they will benefit out of it, and you'll be able to retain your employees. So through the funds of fund, what government is trying to do, it's trying to encourage the enterprises which have the growth opportunity. So it's going to invest over there, the PE funds, and once the investment is received, then you can go for listing on the BSE or the NSE. So there are specified guidelines for that, and you don't need to bring out an IPO.
So there is no requirement of minimum public holding. Once you have a merchant banker or a VC fund who has invested in you, you can go for the listing on these platforms and take benefit of the public fund. And there is easy exit facility provided over there. So these are some of the schemes, existing schemes, and the new announcement which have been made by the government and which everyone can take benefit of, Vivek.
Yeah. So the next question from Chirag was, how does GT help? And I'll take you quickly in next 5 minutes at how does GT can help you. So if you know Grant Thornton, it's a leading consulting and professional services company. And we provide tailor-made solutions to our client, both larger client as well as MSMEs. We work with multiple MSMEs depending on the life cycle they are and depending on the help they want. So we make tailor-made solution, and this could be any solution, right from growth to trying to get working capital within growth. If business consulting, so let's say you are applying for loan, you want to get a business proposal made to actually submit for the loan scheme. So and then you want to grow, you want to acquire a business, so doing a deal advisory, due diligence, to tax and compliances. I mean, various tax aspect we take care of, various compliance aspect we take care of. So we keep you compliant, and then through to all the compliance and outsourcing services, which is related to finance and accounting. So let's say you want to take help within finance and accounting piece, or run your payroll, or do secretarial filing for you, or statutory filing for you. So all these services we provide under the umbrella of Grant Thornton. And we work with, as I said, we work with multiple MSMEs and larger corporates as well. So how do we do it? Specifically for MSME, we have a very focused program, which is we built a shared services for MSME. Now, what does it provide is, let's say you come in and you require certain help, you'll be appointed a single point of contact. So you shouldn't be thinking that Grant Thornton being a large organization, maybe my request will get lost within the organization. You'll have a single point of contact. We will discuss flexibility and scalable model with you for providing this support. You can leverage us for all your non-core activity. I talked about, I mean, most of the MSME wants to outsource their finance function or take help within their finance function, try and get more ideas to structure finance. So all those things, Grant Thornton can help you. You'll have access to SMEs across business value chain. So we have SMEs, and some of us are here. So Lena is from secretarial, I'm from payroll. So you'll have access to all the SME. And then we are committed to robust reporting and timeline. So whatever timeline we work with you, we help you in those timelines. So these are some of the, and this is beautifully packaged as a shared services, specifically focused for MSME, and this is there within Grant Thornton. I give it back to Chirag. Chirag?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Particularly, I think some questions which I've received already personally is that how can Grant Thornton help?
Right.
And I think the emphasis would be is that because you have a shared service platform, the cost of services also reduces, and therefore the MSMEs may not perceive you as expensive. I guess that's important. Yeah. But largely, if you see the questions on the panel, Vivek and Lena, there is one particular burning question around, we've applied under this new scheme, we've done the registration, but we've not heard, back from the government as to our registration has been accepted or not. So what are you hearing, and what should some of the MSMEs here do? What are your thoughts on that?
Over here, Chirag, what we are doing is, it is taking some time. It's not that quick. but also it depends on the information, whether you are filling in the correct information, you have provided the correct data with respect to your plant and machinery, whether it's styling with the IT return which you filed and the turnover, whether it's tallying with the GST return you have filed. So those all questions are there. So that's why it might be taking time.
Sure.
So, Chirag, what Lena is trying to say, if let's say someone is in that space, we can actually look at right from beginning and try and find if everything went fine, and then maybe work with or get answers from government, so we can help in that area also.
Yeah, because clearly it's very frustrating, right, for some of us to apply and then not hear from the government. So clearly we all feel demotivated that, you know, this scheme is either not going to work, etc.
Right.
But maybe there is a process element, and to get it right, and maybe advice from you would be beneficial for them. Then there are there is another interesting question, is that is there some scheme covering employees under these various schemes which you outlined, Lena? Is there something specific for employees, particularly
for employees? I can say that there is skill development schemes where you can register, and employers can register their employee for development of the managerial skills. The skill development schemes are there. So those assistance are provided. Otherwise, the benefit, basically the idea is to help the owners of the MSME. So most of the schemes are oriented towards the owners.
So currently, Lena and Vivek, one other question is that if we need to apply for some of these loans, as you pointed out earlier, that there are the PSUs who are doing it, and then there's the government through these schemes which is getting offered. What would you recommend? Where would be the first port of call for the MSMEs? Where do you think they should go? Should they, or can they double dip into both and try and see who gives them the loans first, working capital or whatever? What should one do?
So this is being disbursed through the banks only. So they should approach the public sector, the relevant banks. Some of the banks are designated MSME banks. So they should know which bank to approach, which branch to approach, and accordingly approach and prepare a good application and take it to them.
Sure. So good. I think I'll hold some of the MSME related questions for towards the end of the session. And if I can quickly request Krishan and Karan to cover some of the matters which I pointed out earlier. So some of my top questions for both of you would be, if we are exporters, and we have many of them here in Rajasthan particularly, what would be the incentives for them under these new schemes, the benefits thereof, particularly in terms of liquidity, given a lot of capital has been stuck in the supply chain, and then how can we, what should we know in terms of input tax credit under GST? It's a big issue, as you all know, particularly for small taxpayers. You know, how do you deal with that? And then filing for GST refunds and overcoming some challenges. There have been some horror stories for a lot of startups, particularly, where, you know, these refunds just don't flow through as well. So your insight and your help will be highly appreciated, Krishan and Karan. Over to you.
Thanks, Chirag, and good evening, everyone. I hope all of you are doing fine. And thanks, Vivek and Lena, for setting the context in terms of MSMEs. While the second part B, which me and my colleague Karan are to cover, are revolving around the questions which Chirag raised, and there are not just questions, there are challenges surrounding some of these benefits to GST filings, to automation, to ever-changing requirements of the law. That's what currently the situation is, and that has been adversely affected by the slowdown to start with in this year, beginning of the year, to the unfortunate and unprecedented COVID event which happened in the later part, as we are right now foreseeing. So given this scenario, while the government has been making efforts to drive compliance, ensure that the revenues are not dipping, but it's not a very happy situation to be in right now. At the same time, the objective of the government is also, and you would have seen that there was a drive for dispensation of refunds and promoting as much as possible any incentives which are available to exporters. So there is a focus which is there on that, but there are infrastructural issues or probably some teething issues which are currently still prevailing in terms of getting these refunds out on time. The idea was to give provisional refunds, which was initially the thought, and that's what probably was the driver for GST exporters. Unfortunately, it did not happen. Still, we are grappling with that, but we've seen that there is a change. There is a positive change in jurisdiction-wise, probably I would say. But specifically talking about the location we are talking to right now, typically in Rajasthan, I see no difference in the situation. But what we have realized is that there are technical glitches which government has to grapple with in terms of the filings made, the accuracy of that, matching it with the returns, matching your data which has been inputted in the returns to your actual filing, etc., reconciliation of that, etc. So there are many such areas which the government still have to look at it manually, and that's probably happened because GST has not been fully automated by the government. And similarly, on the part of the revenue availability as well, the dispensation of money also has to come through the center. That also becomes a challenge, and that results in delayed, awarding of money back to the exporters. These two are the main reasons for delays. We have been representing to the government, trying to get push. The various industry chambers as well have been pushing. There is a positive which has come in certain pockets, but that has to be a pan-India universal application. That's what probably is the expectation, and that's what government is working towards. So far as the current topics are concerned, I think we thought that it is also relevant for the market we are in currently. There are some specific benefits which are readily available and available retrospectively, which is basically the part one of the discussion, which I would cover. I would let Karan talk about the GST refunds and the input credit optimization after the part which I'm going to cover. So there are two schemes I wanted to cover out of the foreign trade policy. One is the SEI scheme, which is service export from India scheme. Other one is the sister of this, which is merchandise export from India scheme. So both these schemes were introduced parallelly in April 2015 under the foreign trade policy of 2015 to 20. These schemes were basically replacement of the erstwhile schemes which were specifically linked to certain specific sectors and markets. So a focused product scheme, a focused market scheme was basically scheme which was driving the products and the markets to which you were exporting, and those were governed by separate schemes. There were similar schemes which were related to agri, etc., which were part of the earlier schemes which are different. All of them got clubbed into MEIS scheme. And the SEI scheme, which is what I'm going to start with, is the service part of it. The service export schemes basically had replaced the erstwhile SFIS scheme, the Serve from India scheme. And this is now specifically covering notified services which are exported from India. The objective is to promote export, and get foreign exchange into India. There are list of notified services which are covered in this, which I'll discuss in the subsequent slide. But this scheme basically, covers export of services. Whether these qualify as export of services under GST or not is not the criteria. They have to qualify as export per se from a foreign trade policy perspective. And for that, what is basically required is you have to earn foreign exchange, and these services should be physically exported to foreign jurisdictions. This is to incentivize the exporters, specifically to offset the infrastructure inefficiencies in India and the associated cost of exports. And so for that, there was a small. In fact, it started with 3% of the total net foreign exchange earned, but it went up to 5% to 7% is the total benefit of the total net foreign exchange earned out of the export of services, which is given back to you in form of scrips. This is a post-export benefit, and this is something which is different from pre-export benefits, which are linked to importing something upfront and getting exemptions, and then use it for exports. But these are basically incentives which are linked to your export turnovers. So the incentive is linked to the turnover, means that the more you export, the more benefit you get. The net foreign exchange is basically calculated from the gross foreign exchange earnings and the expenses made in foreign exchange to meet those, meet that export. So specifically reduce that amount, and that is the net foreign exchange which you earn out of this benefit is what you get the percentage benefit on. So the scrip value of say 3 to 7% is applicable on the threshold, the export which you make. So suppose you make an export of 100, 3% of that is 3 rupees is the scrip which you value, which you get back. There are many services which are allowed to be covered in this, which could be marketing support, sales support, taxation, consultancy services, cargo handling, research and development, technical services, engineering services, construction services, education services, management consulting services. There are many services which are specifically covered for the purpose of this scheme, and the reason being that the service, the government was relying a lot on service exports because that was the fastest growing market to get foreign exchange for Indian companies. However, some of these services were not covered in this for specific reasons. So some of them being that they were already incentivized separately, and some of them did not meet the criteria of meeting that export infrastructure or that cost which are associated with that, because they are already revenue earning sectors. So some of these sectors are not covered in this, specifically in relation to information technology, IT services. Karan, if you can just move to the next one. So these are the categories of services which are currently not covered for this benefit. These are services which are not notified. Firstly, financial sector services, related to currency, bonds, foreign exchange, etc., are not covered. Any equity linked participation, donations, contract which is regular employment, etc., these services are not covered again. EOUs, STPIs, and similar ones, BTP, etc., are also not covered. Export of goods is not covered under SEIS, but it is separately covered under MEIS, which we'll discuss separately. The benefit is not, sorry, Karan, if you can go back to these slides. Yeah. The benefit is not available to STPI and EOUs because they are already getting other indirect tax benefits already for the purpose of saving on customs duties, etc., and they are not liable to pay any taxes when they export. So these schemes are anyways tax neutral. That's why these specific jurisdictions are also not covered. Specific services, like I mentioned, IT is one of the largest exported services from India. Currently not covered. BFSI is banking and financial services, again not covered. Telecom services are also not covered. Services of commission agent also not covered. Now, what is important here is to see that the skilled services which I mentioned earlier are the ones which are currently promoted and the benefits are available on that. These specific sectors are already enjoying specific benefits separately, and that's the reason why they were not covered for the purpose of this scheme. Also, it is important to note, as I mentioned earlier, whether these services qualify as export or not for the purpose of GST is also not relevant, because a very specific category of services in the nature of intermediary or any performance-based services under the GST are subject to GST, even if they're exported from India otherwise, and you're earning foreign exchange. Irrespective of that, if the services are notified under this scheme, you can still take that benefit even if you're paying GST. So this benefit is available independent of that view, whether GST is applicable or not. That means that this benefit is available in a larger sense to most of the exporters of these services, irrespective of whether they're paying GST or not. Karan, can you move to the next one? So I will cover the eligibility and the criteria common, but I'll touch upon the MEIs because both of them run parallelly, and then we'll go to the amount of benefit and the timelines, etc., in the later part, because that is common. So similar to the SEIs I mentioned, this was basically MEIS was for the merchant export scheme, and this scheme was also introduced in parallel. As recently as a couple of days back, there was some announcement which were made on the MEIS, and they have actually stopped accepting the new export shipments, for which the late export or the late orders is post July, April 2020. But the scheme is available retrospectively for the previous period starting 17-18, and this is a scheme again which is notified for specific category of markets as well as category of goods. Over 8,000 tariff items are covered in this scheme currently. And over 230 odd countries or the regions to which you are exporting are covered in this scheme. The benefit varies from typically between 2 to 5% of the realized FOB value, which is the export value of which is disclosed in the shipping bills. Again, this scheme is admissible for the purpose of the criteria for this is basically again sector product specific as well as market specific, and that is in the subsequent slide. Karan, can you move to the next one? Yes. So there are three categories of markets which are given focus here. Category A is a traditional destinations like the European Union and the US. Around 30 such countries are covered. Category B is other major export destinations which are growing markets or the emerging markets. These are basically about 139 countries. Others are basically SAARC countries which are about 70. The category of reward or the quantum of reward is higher to specific sectors like agriculture and eco-friendly products. There is a higher reward for these kind of exports, so that's why they are covered here. Other emerging products which were not supported earlier, which are high potential products like the produce which is fruits, vegetables, dairy, etc. These are also covered for export purposes, and the encouragement is given to these sectors. There are global supported products which are again food products and processed foods, etc., which are tea, coffee, spices, handicrafts, sports goods, etc., furniture. So there is a whole list of these products which are also covered to be exported for these particular regions, and that benefit varies from that range which I mentioned. Specifically supported markets where pharmaceutical industry, industrial machinery, auto machinery, components, etc., steel products, steel machinery, all of these products and raw materials are also allowed to be given this incentive. So there's a whole range of these products, as I mentioned, goes up to beyond 8,000 tariff items on which this benefit can be availed. The only fact being that this benefit has been currently stopped because of the only for the exports post 1st April. That is an issue which is currently being debated by the finance ministry, and the fact that this benefit of MEIS was one, it was already tested earlier because the WTO norms which were basically being raised, the disputes were being raised by other jurisdictions that it does not give a level playing field for exporters from other countries under the WTO norms, and that's why India is actually getting more benefit by giving this value of skill back to Indian exporters, which is against the global WTO norms in which the exports benefits are defined. So that was one reason why MSE this MEI scheme was not decided to be continued, but also because it did not meet the potential export benefit arising to India out of this scheme in the last 5 years, and that's something which also led to stoppage of this currently, and the availability of the fund which was allocated also is something which resulted in this decision as of being stopping for the time being. And now, if just to for statistics, about 15,000 crores was allocated to this scheme in the year 15-16 when that came. It was increased to 50,000 crores by FY20. So the investment or the benefit amount went up almost 3 times from in the 5 years period, but the export remained stagnant at about $350 billion US, and that's the reason why government believed that this scheme is not achieving the desired objective, but it is still incentivizing the previous years in 17, 18, 18, 19, and 19, 20. In these years, this benefit is still available, and that is exactly what is available for SEIS also. Karan, can you go to the next slide? Again, the category of exports again is excluded for the purpose of MEIS is where there's no value add, there is no benefit. So again, under the foreign trade policy, if you're importing goods and exporting them without any value addition, that is not covered, because that is again an activity which is not giving any benefit to India as such, because you're already paying, you're getting that product into India first by giving out money and then exporting them without any value addition. So those kind of products are not covered. SEZ, EOUs already enjoy other benefits because when they export it through DTA, there is no benefit available because these are specific deemed foreign jurisdictions in India. So these benefits are not extended to these particular jurisdictions or these particular schemes. Similar to that is free trade warehousing zones equal to SEZs. This benefit is not available to them. There are some products which are liable to minimum export duty. Those products are also not covered in this. Again, deemed export and export to SEZs, etc., which are physically not exported out of India but remain in India but enjoy deemed export benefit under the foreign trade policy, are also not covered because there is no foreign exchange earning coming directly from outside India. So these schemes are also not included here. Next slide. So talking about timelines, and that's where the whole benefit lies. And if any of you have been are exporters in these categories of which we discussed, and we can obviously there's a list of activities which can be covered. But if these categories are applicable and you believe they are applicable, this benefit goes back in time even if you've not availed them. Up to the year 16-17, this benefit recently got closed for the purpose of SEIS. There was last date of availing it even in the extended period was 31st March 2020, which was extended to 30th June only for 16-17 benefit, only because of COVID situation. That has now been over. There is no extension which has been announced, so it seems that 16-17 benefit is not available as of date. From financial year 2017-18 onwards, this benefit still is available, both under the SEI scheme and the MEI scheme. The last date of filing is the first row, if you see, without any late cut. So late cut means that if this period gets over, post 2007 for the year 17-18, the last date of filing basically was 1 year from the end of that financial year, which was 31st March 2019. If you didn't file by that date, then there are late cuts which were applicable. So 2%, 5%, and 10% is the late cut for every passing year. And if you see for SEIS, if you would have applied at 30th June, there would have been a 5% late cut. For MEIS, 31st July 2020, which is tomorrow, was applicable till 5% late cut. So people who were able to file these schemes within this timeline would have got a 5% late cut. But for people who have yet to file, the late cut is applicable at 10% for FY 17-18. Till 31st March 2021 and July 2021, respectively for SEIS and MEIS. For 18-19, this benefit is again available till 31st December 2020 without any late cut for SEIS. For MEIS, this benefit is has expired without late cut. So 31st December, if you apply till, you still have a 2% minimal late cut, and accordingly the late cuts are defined here. The timelines are there. The maximum timelines are till December 22 for 18-19. And likewise for 19-20, the benefit is still to be notified for SEIS, which means the category as well as the rates are yet to be notified. But currently for 17-18, the SEIS benefits are 3 to 7%, MEIS are 2 to 5%. For 18-19, the benefits of SEIS have already increased from 5% to 7% of the net export value which you export. MEIS 2.2% to 5% again, depending on the product and the market. For 19-20, SEIS benefits are yet to be notified. MEIS already notified 2% to 5%. These schemes are were supposed to be applicable for exports until FY20, because the foreign trade policy which introduced these schemes was applicable till 20. While the foreign trade policy is continued for some time, which is for another year, but these schemes do still have a shelf life, which is as of now FY20. MEIS was supposed to end on 31st December 2020. As of now, as I mentioned to you some time back, the benefits post 1st April, whatever export shipments are being made as per the late export orders are not being allowed to be punched in, but the period before that is still covered. This is a benefit which can amount to huge saving of working capital, and that's the reason why many players are actually going for it. Just to give you a number, around 400 CR of filings were made, or in between the period April to July itself. The claim of 400 crore was made only for MEIS, and that has been stopped unfortunately for the time being because of shortage of funds. But in our experience, SEIS scheme, which is for services, is currently even in lockdown we were able to get this benefit for clients who were not even who were not aware or who were late in filing also got benefit for 16-17 because they filed just in time. But for 17-18, 18-19, 19-20, this benefit is still available. And if you calculate the percentage of this benefit into the export value, it is pretty large. It can be pretty large depending on the volume of exports which you are making under services or for goods. That's the reason why this benefit is readily available. You can easily transfer these scripts in the market as well if you're not able to utilize them, and that's what I'll discuss in the subsequent slide. Karan? So the duty credit scripts can be utilized as follows. if you are an exporter, you're entitled to these benefits. You apply for these benefits as per the timelines I mentioned. The quantum of benefits is also, obviously assessed. The categories are assessed. The DGFT, which is the concerned authority, will do a review of this, application with the claim which you make. They will obviously look at the actual exports which you're making, the category which you're claiming, depending upon the correctness of the claim, the legitimacy of the claim. If you are entitled to the benefit, then the benefit in the nature, the percentage which I mentioned to you is sanctioned. The benefit which is given is by way of scripts which are handed over to the exporter, and that benefit can be availed by using that script for the purpose of paying customs duties for future imports. The IGST portion is not included, but the basic custom duty can be paid. The additional custom duty can be paid from that. These benefits, again, you can use custom for payment of custom duties. You can also use it for any shortfall in the export obligations which you have for the purpose of other schemes which are in which any export criteria is not being met. So wherever there is a shortfall in meeting any export obligation in other schemes, you can use this script to adjust that portion of the shortfall. Again, under the foreign trade policy, there are certain application fees and composite fee which has to be paid. You can use this for that as well. If you're not interested in using them, or you're not required to pay any duties, then you can sell them in the open market. These are freely sellable in the market at any point of time. There are buyers which are available, large trading houses which are always available in the market, who are willing to buy these. They carry a percentage of discount because the other party which is buying will upfront pay you the money for the script, but they will basically there's a market value which is prevailing in the market currently. Probably that market value is low because of the current demand as well as the quantum of import, but it can range, and whatever percentage, assuming current market price is about 95%, so you get 95% of the value of script which you pocket and get money in your hand, and you can ultimately, that becomes a working capital saving. And for those for the purchaser, again, that there is a discounted value at which you bought them. So even if they use it for payment of custom duty, they save some amount of that duty out of this saving which they make, because they're buying it at a lower price, which means that if they buy the script at 95 and they have to pay duty of 100, they have bought that script for 95, so 5 rupees of saving is already there for them. So even if you are not yourself importers and exporters for these products, even for you can purchase these scripts. They are not liable to GST. They are exempted from GST. So if you make a purchase of these scripts at a discounted value, you can use them for subsequent payment of your duties. So they are available in the market. You can buy them at a discounted price, which will also result in a duty saving to you. So the benefit arises in utilization, sale in the market to get you working capital. Also on your import bill, you can use these at a discounted value when you procure them to pay discharge custom duty, and that also results in a saving. So this is exactly what the scheme benefits are, and there is a whole list of specific categories of exports for which this benefit is available. I was able to touch upon some illustrative ones. I mentioned what is the scheme not available for, and we'll be happy to take questions, and subsequently, if there is any interest or anybody who believes this benefit is available or they want to buy these scripts on the market, we'll be happy to discuss that separately. So this basically was my coverage on the SEIS and the MEIS part, which is the foreign trade policy schemes. I would hand it over to my colleague Karan, who will take you through the GST portion, and we'll address all the questions which are coming in the chat alongside. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Krishan, and thank you, Chirag, for setting up the context for the last part of this webinar and the live telecast. So last, we are going to discuss GST input credit optimization, and we'll just touch upon on GST refunds. So like, my colleague Krishan mentioned about benefits of those schemes under foreign trade policy. So this is a clear-cut optimization opportunity, or it is akin to a cash input tax credit for any organization to have it intact and be able to avail it and utilize it at the right time. And if not, then there is a recourse to get that input tax credit, what goes into the procurement of goods or services, as a refund, subject to certain conditions and certain transactions which are covered for refund for GST. So I'll just touch upon the importance and the timelines, etc. In subsequent slides, and post that we can have the Q&A round also around which can be posted on the chat box. So what kind of credits are available under GST? It is the credit of IGST which is available, CGST, SGST, UTGST. UTGST is nothing but Union Territory GST, which is paid on procurement of supply of goods and services which are utilized or which are consumed during the business transactions of the company. While there are certain restrictions or there are certain conditions to be fulfilled for availing this credit, but yes, most of the conditions are very standard, which was there in the erstwhile law. If we talk about excise, if we talk about service tax or VAT, so those conditions are still prevalent, and those timelines, while they were not there in all the legal provisions which were applicable before GST, but yes, GST sets a timeline to also take and avail the credit for the financial year. So the timeline which is prescribed under GST is earliest of filing of September return following the end of financial year. For example, financial year 2021, the timeline is going to be September 21, or of filing of annual return. If somebody files the annual return before September, so that becomes the timeline for availing the credit, post which this credit would lapse. So which means any invoices which we procure for goods and services are to be dealt with very ultra caution, with a ultra precaution and care, because that is, like I mentioned, it is like a cash to us or to anybody. If we miss out, if we don't have proper documentation, if we don't have proper details on the invoice, or the supplier is not mentioning correct tax rates or taxable amounts, we lose out on that kind of invoice, and that credit is lost forever if that is not corrected within the time frames. So what are the conditions which were there in the erstwhile law which have been borrowed and carried forward in GST laws also? One is possession of the invoice. There has to be receipt of goods or services. You cannot take any credit if there is on advances which are paid to the vendors or the suppliers. That is not allowed. Only once we receive the goods or services, the credit can be availed. We have to make the payment of tax for that procurement to the vendor. And in case of reverse charge, we have to make the payment of tax before taking credit to the government. And the monthly returns have to be filed. So we have to be compliant in all totality to avail this credit in this GST regime. Recently, in October 19, there has been a restriction in availment of credit. So the restriction has come because there was no matching concept that was that was kept at abeyance. Till now, it is kept at abeyance. But however, they had gotten a restriction that whatever is shown in the returns of your supplier, if that is not coming in the returns of of the company who is availing the credit will be restricted to 10% of what is available as credit appearing in GSTR 2A of that assessee. So which means we have to engage and we have to do reconciliations on a monthly basis. If we do not do that, there will be a working capital impact immediately, because that credit 100% which can be taken will be only restricted to 10% of that invoice. So we have to engage with our suppliers. We have to tell them to file their returns on time. And this exercise has to be done very regularly if we need to take the credit on timely basis and not lose out on the working capital aspect. So there are certain kind of services or supplies, I would say, on the procurement side which are not eligible for credit. So that ineligible or negative list of credit is given under section 17(5) of the GST law. So wherein this has again been borrowed largely from service tax law, where it talks about certain goods or services which are received by the assessee on which credit is not applicable. So for example, on the slide, if you can see on the right hand side, the blocked credit is on account of motor vehicles. If we are not a dealer in the motor vehicles or do not have any business of the same nature, the credit for availment, what we buy for our business, any car or any bus or any such kind of motor vehicle, we cannot take the credit. Only there is an exception to this rule, that wherever the seating capacity is more than 13 passengers, including the driver, only there, and it is used for transportation of passenger or goods, only then the credit is available. And similarly, we have canteen facility, we have other restaurant or outdoor catering, or we provide some health coupon to the our employees, which are procured from the relevant agencies, are not allowed, or medical insurance, life insurance for the employees is not allowed to be taken as a credit if any GST is charged by such companies. And similarly, on construction, we will not be allowed if we have to construct any immovable property. If we have to construct a factory, in that sense, the credit is not allowed. While again, there is an exception to that rule. Only the companies who are dealing in such kind of business, who are providing ghost contract services, will be eligible for that. And any goods which are lost, stolen, destroyed, disposed, or any gift given to anybody, or free samples distributed, again, the credit which had come on those invoices have to be reversed. So these are kind of restrictions which are there, even if they are used for business, but there is a specific restriction in the law that these kind of credits are not available. So while booking the credits in our SAP systems or booking the credits in our GSTR returns, we need to be very careful. We cannot be taking any wrong credit, because there are consequences of availment of wrong credits. So the consequences can be reversed. One, there is a reversal of credit. There could be additional interest liability on wrong availment of credit, because the liability would have been paid less if that has been utilized. Moving on, I touched upon the importance of every business on the reconciliations especially after October 19, when the rule of matching with the two-way has come in. So invoice-wise matching under the rule 2A for availment of ITC is mandatorily to be done by every assessee every month for claiming the ITC in their GST returns. So this is a paramount, because if we take wrong credit, there are consequences. Like I mentioned, there will be a interest cost, and the tax has to be discharged, on which this wrong availment of credit has been utilized. Also, there is a rule we need to also monitor that we are making the payment of the services or the goods procured to our vendors within 180 days. If that does not happen, we need to reverse our credit along with the interest if the payment is not made to the creditor. So that aging and this rule was again carried forward from service tax. In service tax, it was 90 days. Now it is 180 days. So we have to consider the same thing for goods also under GST. Earlier in erstwhile regime for VAT, this was never the condition. It has come under GST, which is common for both goods and services. The creditor aging has to be seen. Another important aspect where everybody, all the assessees needs to be very, very ultra cautious is in distribution of common credits. So where the business has multiple registrations and there is a head office, which is a typical scenario in most of the business houses. So any common services or any common activity such as IT function, such as admin function, which is done through a head office to for its branches pan India, wherever they are and registered different and having a different GSTNs, the credit has to be distributed as per the provisions under the law. So there is an ambiguity between whether a company should take ISD registration for distribution of common credit or not, or a cross charge is possible. But yes, there is no clear-cut provision which talks about any restriction or any mechanism which talks about cross charge. So there is only one mechanism which has again been borrowed, that too only for services. That is an input services distributor mechanism, which was prevalent under service tax law, to be followed for the common credit to be distributed. So this is one area where the government is very critical. They will look into GST because of multiple registrations unlike service tax, there was a centralized registration. There was no problem that this kind of booking was happening under one registration. But under GST, we will have to distribute the credit appropriately to the appropriate GST numbers in the each state. So that is something we need to be very careful on. And any expenses which are incurred while there for business purposes, for hotel stays or any air travel, has to be seen very carefully, because the invoices what we receive are in name of the employees and not of the companies. And at times the GST number is not mentioned. So while these expenses what we incur while doing our business are eligible, but because of these misses in the invoices or any deficiencies mentioned on the document of taking ITC, on account of that the credit gets denied later on. So we have to be very careful. So any the accounts payable team who's making the booking of these invoices should be trained, should be told that all these fields are very mandatorily to be there on the face of the credit taking document. Only then the GST adjustments or GST credit would be available on these areas. So these are typical areas where we have seen most of our clients have sought help, sought professional help, or probably have struggled to maintain all these checks, because whenever we do health check or any diagnostic dipstick reviews, we find these very, very sticky areas which are pertaining to ITC. And yes, there is nothing that it cannot be streamlined. There is an automation process. There are processes which we can build in, and that can be set, maker, checker, etc. can be there for all these processes, so that not even a single penny is missed out or left behind. So these are suggestive courses for how do we optimize the input tax credit. One is of course the little automation through a reconciliation tool. So there is a reconciliation tool which will throw up the reconciliations and throw up the errors or any suggestions which are there, which are there in the when there is a mismatch between the 3B and 2A of the SSE. So this is something which can be resorted to. And if the operations are not, or the volumes are not very huge, so that can also be done manually. But most of the cases, even if there is a transaction of 50 invoices every month, it takes a human error, and human error also can lead to a loss in credit. So we recommend very strongly to use a automated tool which is not very expensive, and also that will give the correct course of action and correct timely resolution to the wrongly availed or mismatch in the credits. The second point or the second optimization mechanism could be one-time study can be taken by the or any help can be taken by the advisor. If an advisor has already advised in the implementation, so it is always good to have a second eye or a third eye view from a independent advisor, so that they look at the things very independently and give you the updated optimization structures or mechanisms which can be followed for the organization. And of course, the last one is dipstick reviews, health checks, and the internal processes around can be checked whether everything, at times what we have noticed that everything goes fine, but the internal processes are little weak. So there is a person who is making the entry in the GST returns, but there is nobody reviewing it. So that mechanism can be built in, and that mapping of all the responsibilities, all of the eligibility criteria and the trainings can be imparted to all these team of the company who is making the GST returns and doing these reconciliations. So the endeavor is not to lose out on any credit, because that is the key, that is the asset of the company, and nobody will really want to lose out the asset which is lying on the table. Another aspect is related to ITC is GST refunds. So GST refunds is not only in the case of ITC which is left accumulated and not utilized. So there are 3 to 4 scenarios where the refunds can be applicable. One is export, That is with payment of IGST when LUT is not taken, and without payment of IGST when LUT is taken. So LUT is nothing but letter of undertaking which needs to be furnished to the department that we are not paying IGST and still exporting subject to other conditions which are required for any transaction to be exported. And any suppliers which are made to SEZ units or the recipient of deemed exports on which the ITC or on which the refund is again applicable of GST which has been paid. Any inverted duty scenario where the output liability is less than the input liability, in that case also there could be accumulation of ITC in which the government has allowed ITC to be taken as a refund. And any excess credit tax paid, which could be accidentally paid, on in a different head. For example, we had to make a payment of IGST. Instead of IGST, we have made the payment of CGST, SGST. So we can take the refund of that and make the payment of IGST. So that is another example of claiming refund under GST. The excess balance, which is there in the electronic cash ledger, that again can be taken as a refund from the government because that is our own balance which we have parked into the cash ledger from our bank account to make the payment. So that is something we will have to see wherever our transactions are lying in, wherever there is a opportunity to take refund, because this is immediately going to lead to working capital inflows and improve the liquidity of the company. So that structuring or that I has to be there to identify that our transactions are falling under refund, and while there is a accumulation of ITC, or there is any strategy that we can make the payment of export, we can make the payment of IGST and then claim the refund. So that also strategy has to be developed around how we can take the credit, entire credit. So when I'm saying strategy, it is typically applicable in case of capital goods because the refund of capital goods is not applicable. So in those cases, what many of the exporters do is they make the payment of IGST and claim the refund. In that, there is no restriction for claiming of ITC of capital goods as well. So that strategy or that advice is something, we have to structure and we have to identify for all the transactions of the businesses. So this is a typical refund process. We will have, there is a timeline for filing of refund. It has to be 2 years from the relevant date. So the definition of relevant date is different for different scenarios. So typically it is 2 years, which we need to calculate for each of the case in each of the transaction. So after we find the refund application, it is to be filed online. Everything, all the processes are online now, unlike before. Before I think September 19 or somewhere, the change has happened that everything has got online for the government side also. So after we file online, there will be a verification which will be done by the officer who is reviewing a refund. He can ask for, and most of the cases, they are asking for physical filing as well to verify all the invoices, all the workings, whether the matching has been done as per register of GSTR 2A. So all those kind of checks and verifications are still done by the officers, and which are unfortunately manual. And then post that, if they believe that there is something missing, they issue a deficiency memo, and we reply to the deficiency memo clearing all the deficiencies and file the refund application again, and basis which they grant provisional refund of 90%. And as per law, the refund of 90% has to be dispersed within 7 days. And then after they are completely satisfied with the file, within 60 days, they are bound to give 100% balance 10% refund. So that is the final process how the refund application works. Yeah, I think that's it from my side. I again pass it on to Krishan that how can we assist the clients. Then after Krishan speaks, then over to Chirag. Thank you.
Thanks, Karan. I think we are almost covered the time, and we probably would have overshot it. So I would not want to take more time in terms of taking that time for Q&A, but very quickly, we are providing end-to-end services in relation to any of these activities. whether it's input credit optimization studies, whether it's actual automation or using any, we are having in-house tools to do this reconciliation, which helps ensuring that the credit is not lost, ensuring that you're not doing too much of manual intervention, which results in errors. So that's something which can be, we'll be happy to discuss. Maybe in the next session we can do a demo as well, or specifically if somebody is interested. For the first part of it, the export benefits, we are doing end-to-end services from identifying the benefit to quantifying it, to filing, to representing, and to also help people who want to sell that in the market. We identify buyers as well at a very competitive rate, so that you get the maximum out of it. People who are interested in buying it for the use, we help them in getting it the lowest possible rate, both ways. So I think it's a win-win situation for both. So all the processes probably we are doing. We have 100% success in getting these benefits. Almost, I think I would just take an example of the lockdown. In the last 3 months, we got almost 7 claims sanctioned for SEIS worth almost I would say 50 crores of money, which came to the people who had claimed it. So I think it's all about the fact that having the right, filing it legitimately to representing it properly is what you need to do. While government may have some challenges to give that to the manual intervention, but I believe that with professional help, with your own expertise as well, it's not something which is not possible. It is very much possible, and it's a very short-term thing. And in a period of say couple of 3 months or 4 months, you will actually get success if you do the whole activity properly. And that's probably what you need. And guidance is what probably helps in always getting get that alignment with the government, and that's what probably helps in getting any sticky claims back from the government as well. With that, I'll give it back to Chirag. Sorry if you probably would have overshot by some time, but I hope we were able to do justice.
Yeah, thank you, Krishan and Karan. Given the vastness of this topic and the topics which we covered through the whole session, my recommendation to Grant Thornton would be is to see if we can find a mechanism to do a diagnostic for many of our businesses here, or perhaps a one-on-one session with them. We'll work out the mechanics, but I think contextualizing their issues, whether it's GST, export, MSME registration, I think it would be useful. For me, the key takeaway of the entire session was that how can we get it right first time, be it our registration, applications, and follow through, supporting it with the right documentation. I guess that's a big challenge which everyone faces. How do we get it right? And in those areas, how GT can help us will be very useful. I also would like to thank Rohit and Pragya, whom we noticed have been responding to a lot of queries in the chat box. So thank you for that. What I'll do now is I'll open up, given that there's hardly any time left, there's 5 minutes left. I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to reserve them. And if I can open up from the audience a couple of questions, so that we can address them. So audience, we have 5 minutes. I can probably take two questions, 2 or 3 questions, depending on how complicated they are. So unmute all and see if you can take some questions which is directed to whoever.
We can unmute themselves.
Yeah, so you can unmute yourselves if you have any questions. I'll give you 30 seconds. If there are no questions, then I'll ask 2 or 3 on my behalf.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Is it possible to take 2 Udyam Aadhaar registration on the same Aadhaar number?
This is probably for Lini.
Yes, we replied the same in the chat box also. Yes, that's possible.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, if there's no question coming, I have 2 questions here. Just a clarification, Krishan. In the export scheme benefits, are we saying that you can claim it retrospectively, some of the benefits from 17, 18 onwards? Is that what you said?
That's right. The window is still open, Chirag, to file these claims back from 17-18. In fact, you can file all the claims together. 17-18 and 18-19 are available, notified, for SEIS. For MEIS, all 3 years are available because in SEIS, the 19-20 rates and product, categories are yet to be notified. But we are expecting that also to come because that period is already over. It was already covered by the policy when it was announced. So basically, at least till FY20, all claims are legitimately available retrospectively.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification. Then in the MSME process, second question perhaps for Vivek or Leena, is that what would you give? What 3 tips would you give to us in terms of getting a proper credit rating? Once again, first get it right first time. So when we have to get our credit rating, what tips would you give us typically so that, we have the right documentation?
So I'll say your documentation needs to be proper, like your ITR returns and the GST returns, they need to be updated. You need to be assessed over the system so that you have a seamless kind of registration process for yourself. So the documentation and the filings need to be completed. And also, like there shouldn't be any default in terms of payments, and the entity needs to have a good track record, and including the directors of that entities. So in case it's a company, otherwise it's the proprietor or the partner. So a good track record, so that will help.
So but in terms of credit rating, is there anything else beyond we paying our taxes on time and properly? Are there any other factors one needs to think about?
So suppose you have outstanding loans in your name or in the name of the company, so that needs to be paid on time, and there shouldn't be any cases kind of a thing filed against you.
Understand. Okay, so I guess we're right on time. It's 6:30. And I would like to thank the entire Grant Thornton team for not only for your time, but useful tips and advice. And also if you can take that request through and we can facilitate some of the sessions. It's a vast topic, as I said. And we truly appreciate this engagement. And I'm sure there'll be many more sessions like this. Perhaps next time we will do one topic each to give it full justice. This was quite a lot. A melange of topics, very complicated, particularly for simple souls like me. But I'm sure we can improvise and really do justice to each of these very complex and difficult tasks. And we welcome you all to Rajasthan. We're happy to host you once things improve. And once again, thank you all from Grant Thornton and all the participants who have endured this session for 1.5 hours. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Chirag.
Thanks, Chirag.
Thank you so much.
Bye.